What is up, my YouTube family? Welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, then it's just welcome to my channel. Now welcome back. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button because you will not be disappointed, baby. Unless of course your taste level is lacking. So everybody else, I hope you're doing well. I need my Love Island girlies and guys to hang out with me for a second in the end. Because Huda, please. Okay, Huda, please. But for right now, we're gonna get into this crazy case that I stumbled upon. I'm surprised I had never heard of this. But I thought it was very interesting, as well as all of the questions that remain around this case. Y'all, let's just run it down, because it's quite a few things to unpack here. And I'm real curious to know what y'all's opinions are. So this is the story of college best friends David Coughlin and Rafi Kodikian. They live in Boston, Massachusetts. The year is 1999, and they have a summer trip for Santa Barbara, California, planned for the end of July. Rafi will be entering into a master's program for environmental engineering there in the fall, and he wanted to go scope out the scene before he moved there. He also wanted to bring along his best friend David. The two of them were practically inseparable. David is extremely excited to go along with him to see what's going on, and so the two of them decide to make a really memorable trip. So instead of flying out together, they decide to do a 5-day road trip instead. Now, the guys, they stop at several different bars along the way. They shoot pool, take shots with the locals. And although neither of them are really experienced when it comes to the outdoors and wildlife, they also plan to do some camping when they get closer to California. So 500 miles into their trip, they reach a park in southern New Mexico called Carlsbad Caverns National Park. And this is where they decide that they'll set up camp for the night. They speak with park ranger Lance Matson here, who offers them a couple suggestions. One being that they head to Rattlesnake Canyon to pitch their tent and set up camp. And two, he recommends that they take a gallon per person per day that they plan to be out there of water. Goes over the safety protocols, the do's, the don'ts of the situation, the shoulds, and the should nots. Goes over the permit for the guys, so they get that signed and squared away. And the guys only plan to stay for one night, so they only get a permit for that night. Their plan is to head out early the next morning. Now, as far as the water goes, instead of the gallon per person, because they'll only be out there like not even a full 24 hours, they instead grab 3 16-ounce bottles of water between the two of them and 2 bottles of Gatorade from the Canyon's gift shop. They also grab a topographical map that neither of them knew how to read, but I'm not sure that they knew that at the time of purchase, or if they did know that and they figured that, things would just make sense once they're out there in the wild. They park in the designated parking area, which you can see here on the map. And then the two guys walk toward the floor of the canyon looking for like designated camping sites. But this wasn't that type of park. There were no just add your tent areas pre-plucked out for camping. It was just complete and utter wilderness. So when they get to the canyon's floor and they realize, like, wait, we're not seeing any little spaces where we can set up camp, make a few circles, cut a few corners, looking for a flat surface that would just be nice to set up a tent. At one point, they end up walking back up the canyon a little bit, but not the same direction that they came down. And the area that they settle in is right under a mile's distance away from where the car is parked. Unfortunately, though, the guys have been more distracted with looking ahead and paying attention to where they're going and not so much paying attention to where they've come from. So once they find a nice flat surface, the tent is put up and they set it up right near the trail. They don't go too far from it. The guys, they get their little fire going and they cook corn and boiled hot dogs using one of the 3 bottles of water that they have. They eat, chill, chat, and then go to bed for the night. Now, the next morning, they wake up bright and early, having filled their camping desires. They pack up their things and begin their mile or so hike back toward the car using the cairns that mark the trail. Now, cairns, because I ain't know what a cairn was before. The only cairn I know got a little piece of Bob girl. She be yelling in the store for the manager. These are like stacked stones that they'll put and set up to like guide you toward a trail. You know what I'm saying? Out in the wild. So they do have these at the national park, and the guys are using these to get back to the car. Before noon, they are out of water. They realize that one of the bottles of Gatorade has been left in the car. So at this point, that's their North Star. They've been walking a little longer than they feel like they should have, but they keep going because they're like, you know what? Like, we thirsty. We're out of water. We need to get to the car. We're not that far from it. And that Gatorade is in the car. So let's just keep going. But before they know it, a whole hour has passed, and then 2 hours have passed, and the car is nowhere in sight. Okay, so look at this map. This parked car area here is where the car is. This is their red Mazda. They traveled up the entrance trail and made a right and went down that way. Made their turns, went down to the canyon floor, made a couple turns, came up a little bit. The guys did manage to make it back up to this point where the red dot is using the Karens, but somehow they missed the Karens that are at this point that would have turned them left back up the entrance trail and then to the parking area where they would have found the car. Instead, they kept straight down Rattlesnake Canyon Trail. Now, Rattlesnake Canyon paths are said to be confusing even for like experienced hikers. And at this point, the guys either believe that they're walking in the right direction or they're just hopeful that they are. By hour 3, they just accepted the fact that they are now lost. They decide to stop, rest for a minute, and try to, think of a plan. They are exhausted. They've been walking in the blazing desert heat for hours. The trail markers have disappeared. They're nowhere to be found. And the guys know that they're not circling, but they don't have an idea of where they are at all. Anyway, so that's like not much help. They're just in open desert surrounded by unfamiliar terrain. They've looked over this map many times. They cannot make sense of like where they are. The map might as well be in a whole different language. And unfortunately, Rattlesnake Canyon is very remote, so they're not running into anybody. They find a ridge, so they decide to climb that. And once they get to the top of it, they look and still can't really tell which direction they should go in. But they do find a little bush that they can sit under and get some shade. And the ridge is like scattered with these prickly pear fruits. Now they ain't quite ripe, but the guys still decide to eat them and like drink as much of the juice from them as possible for sustenance and hydration. And then they hit another little pocket of luck when it starts to like rain and storm. And so the guys still have the empty water bottles. They collect as much rainwater as they can. They drink as much of it as they can. They're like sucking it off of rocks, collecting it in their mouths off of like the ground and little holes, and spitting it into the water bottles because they've of course realized by now that hydration is a huge issue. Y'all, once the sun goes down, they decide to go ahead and repitch their tent and prepare to spend another night. And once it got dark, right before they went to sleep, the two guys see lights, what they believe to be headlights, in the distance and felt relieved that they were near the road. Now, they were in no shape to do so right now, having spent all day in the desert with no water, child, weak, hot, and hungry. So the plan is for them to get up early the next morning, like right at daylight, and travel in that direction. Unfortunately though, that direction is west and their car is east. And honestly, at this point where they are, had they traveled in any other direction, they would have been okay. South would have taken them to a farmland where farmers work and they would have eventually stumbled upon people. North would have taken them to another trail that was running horizontally to their trail with cairns that would have pointed them to the direction of their car. It would have been a longer trip than them just setting out east, but they would have made it to the car. Their 100-degree weather hike starts bright and early the next morning. Rafi has been journaling the whole trip and he's been taking into account everything that's been happening up until this point. He decides to just write in the journal and leave a letter behind at their campsite just in case like a ranger or other hikers ran into the campsite while they were gone. The note he leaves explains the situation. It has their names on it, their contact information, that they have no food and no water, and that they're headed toward where they think the road is. They're headed west. It lists their ages and their names as well. Then the two of them set off in the direction that they'd seen the light coming from the night before, and an hour passes with no sign of the road. Either it was a mirage that they saw or something else completely. Either way, they were wrong. And this realization brings panic. Both of the men become frantic. Both of them are very weak. David's legs are cramping really bad. His stomach is starting to hurt from the prickly pear. And still, for as far as their eyes can see, there is no road, there are no cars, no more headlights, nothing. Just desert with no end. Then they go after what they believe they saw in the distance, which was 2 bottles of water. Both of them saw it thought they saw it. They make the very challenging commute down to where they see these bottles, but once they get to them, they're not actually there. And this happens a couple more times where they chase after these phantom bottles of water. And then they just decide to stop chasing them because they're losing so much energy just to get there and see that they're not really there. Y'all ain't even gonna tell me I got all of this scent powder in my hair. And now 24 hours without any hydration, they decide to go back to their campsite, hopeful that a park ranger or a hiker, somebody has come across their campsite, read their note, and is waiting there to render aid. But when they get back to the campsite, it is completely untouched, undiscovered. August 7th is now day 3 that the guys have been out there in the desert. Rafi drank his own urine in an effort to hydrate himself, but it ended up causing him to vomit. David is now having these terrible cramps, and not just abdominal cramps, but cramps in his legs as well. He is barely able to walk, doubling over in pain, and it's just become a very stressful and dire situation. So they decide to make distress signals. They take rocks and try to form the word SOS, but they only have the strength collectively to form half of the 3-letter word. So this is all they managed to get. In their second attempt at a signal, Rafi lights his sleeping bag on fire to make like a smoke signal. It created smoke, but not enough to be seen. On the third night, they decide to cut the bottom of the tent open so that they could lay directly on the stones, which they realized were a lot cooler at night. And at this point, they decide to accept their fate, which they believe is that they have exhausted all of their resources and help likely will not make it in time. So they just lay there and they talk. There's really not much else to do. David is in terrible, agonizing pain. At one point, he is just screaming like for help or for a doctor. And Rafi said that he just decided to scream with him because he knew nobody heard him, but he just didn't have the heart to tell his friend, who was obviously in a lot of pain. Then Rafi hands David his journal where he writes a very loving farewell message to his girlfriend. Now, David, who is violently ill, muscles hurting, dehydrated, sick from the bears, does not believe that he's gonna make it much longer. So he takes this knife that they had and makes an attempt to end his own suffering via that and his wrists, but it was very dull and it would not work. He was also very weak at this point, and so he turned to his best friend, Rafi, and tells him that he must do it. Just take it and put him out of his misery. Now, initially, Rafi says no, but David insists, begs. He is inside of the tent, lifts up his shirt.
He turned to me and he said, "You gotta end this." And at first I wasn't really sure what he meant. And I said no. He said, "You know they're not coming." And I said, "Yeah, no, they're not coming." And he said, "Put it through my chest." And I pushed it through his chest. But I fucked up. And I hit his lung. Because when I pulled the knife out, air came out. I told him I had to do it again. And he said, "Okay." And this time, I thought I hit his heart. Blood came out. And he said, "Pull it out." And I did. And I asked him if he was still in pain, and he said no. He said he felt a lot better. And he smiled.
His August 8th journal entry reads, "I killed and buried my best friend today. Dave had been in pain all night. At around 5 or 6, he turned to me and begged that I put my knife through his chest. I did. And the second time when he wouldn't die." At least that's what he tells Park Ranger Madsen had happened when the ranger finds him just hours later. Now, the afternoon of August 8th, which was just hours after he had put his friend out of his misery, it's about noon when Ranger Madsen notices a red Mazda parked in the parking area. It's the only car there, and he recognizes it as the vehicle of the two guys who had purchased the permit for a one-night stay. Now, overstaying their welcome down to the park, according to Ranger Madsen, was not uncommon. People came down there, they want to pay for one day, take 2 or 3 nights. At this point, he thinks he's just trying to locate them to let them know, like, hey, you gotta go. So instead of assuming the words, he just decided to proceed with protocol. Grabs up a volunteer, asks if he would like to, or if he was available to come help him search for some campers, some hikers. And less than a mile into their walk, they spot the tent pitched out in the open right near the trail. Very easy to find. He actually made a comment to the volunteer that he was happy that they had actually made themselves so easy to find. But then when they get closer to it, he realizes that something is terribly wrong here. Unzipping the tent's flap, he is horrified to find Rafi laying there on his back, only in his shorts. Very, very sick looking. But he is coherent and asks if they have water, which they do. Now, while the ranger is giving him water, he asks him where his friend is, and Rafi points over beyond the tent to a pile of rocks and says that he had killed him. The ranger goes over to the area, removes several of the rocks, and then sees David's face. And at that point, he goes on and he calls for backup, calls the police. And the police are not quite buying Rafi's story of a mercy killing.
Kodikian seemed both calm and collected.
He knew exactly what was going on. He thought enough to ask for his sunglasses before we got on board the helicopter. That's not a sign of someone who's dehydrated to the point of desperation. Being out of water, being dehydrated. He had his senses about him about a lot of other things. So, the two don't really match up. You just don't go out in the country or the woods or whatever type of country you're in and give up that easy.
And because this happened at a national park, it is within the FBI's jurisdiction, so them girls show up down to the hospital with questions. Okay? To them and the local police, a few things just don't add up. Like how he didn't have the strength, along with his friend, to spell out SOS, but had enough strength afterward to drag David from the tent and then completely cover him with a bunch of rocks, some of them weighing over 70 pounds. But before answering their questions, Rafi asked to speak with his father, and before explaining to them in further detail what happened, he wanted to speak with David's family because he wanted them to hear the full story first, and he wanted it to come from him. But I think after talking to his dad was like, yeah, we not talking to them at all. Because at that point, he lawyers up. The county sheriff, Mark Anthony Click, said, quote, "I don't care what anyone says." He said he was not buying it, that it did not happen the way that Rafi is claiming that it did. He said even if it did happen that way, it doesn't change the fact that he killed a man, and that is illegal to do. And the federal courts actually shared the same sentiments. Per the prosecution, Rafi had no right to take a man's life, regardless of his intentions, even if said man asked him to do it, and they maintained that David Kodikian would have been alive today if it had not been for Rafi's actions. Child, little did they know help was on the way, and unfortunately this happened before help could reach them. The prosecution also leans heavily on the fact that Rafi was moderately to severely dehydrated, but not close to death, and neither was his friend David per the autopsy. They also had an unopened can of beans at the campsite, which, child, the sheriff basically said if they were so thirsty and dehydrated and all of the things, why didn't they drink the bean juice? And we got that not so beautiful bean footage.
Beans definitely have a juice in them. That's a form of a liquid.
Get a load of this guy, child. He looked like he delights in bean juice. He looks like a damn bean. Then Rafi had said that they had climbed the ridge to look for a trail, get an overview of the landscape. And when they did that, they didn't see any trails or anything that pointed them in the right direction. But the road and the trails are clearly visible from the top of the ridges that all surrounded the area that they found the guys in. So that struck them as odd. 2 trail markers were within view of the campsite, no further than 80 feet apart. So that's another thing that the prosecution and the park rangers and the sheriff and the FBI just don't understand how they missed it and remained lost. And as all of these details are coming to light, more and more people are becoming skeptical of Rafi's story. A lot of the locals did not believe it at all.
Mercy killing? Come on, that's ridiculous. It's totally ludicrous. I think they got into a tiff amongst themselves. He killed him and got away with it.
How could he lift in rocks if he's so dehydrated? How could he lift in rocks to bury his friend? And some of the rocks that big around.
A lot of people were saying that Rafi watched way too many movies and had planned this out, what he thought would be the perfect murder and looked like it if nobody, I guess, was paying close enough attention. They felt like they were the ones paying close enough attention to realize that this was a scheme that Rafi had set up. Unfortunately for Rafi Kodikian, before he could be reunited with his family back home, he is charged with the murder of his best friend and put in jail to await his trial. And then, of course, the rumors began to swirl about what really happened down at the canyon. There was one, or the biggest one, was that David had confessed to having an affair with Rafi's now ex-girlfriend Kirsten. And Kirsten was actually the one that had introduced the two guys. And the three of them had remained close friends even after Rafi and Kirsten had broken up. There were all of these photos of the three of them like hanging out, shooting pool, having a time together, looking happy, and people just took that, made this story that there was something going on, something had been confessed. David got mad. The two of them got into a physical altercation, and David came out on top. Child, this rumor here was swirling so hard and crazy that the FBI actually sent detectives to their home to speak with Kirsten and their friends and other people that actually know them, to see if this story had some validity. Now, they got down there and they were not able to confirm it. Actually, they got down there and heard the opposite of what they expected to hear. Everybody had nothing but nice things to say about the friendship. Everybody said the two of them never even fought. They were like brothers. David's own family wasn't questioning the validity of Rafi's story. They believed that what Rafi said was true, and they would not have hurt David otherwise. The statement that they issued mentioned that although questions remain, they do not believe that Rafi had malicious intent. And he maintains his story all the way up into his trial, that this is not something that he planned, that he never would have done this, especially to his best friend. He says that he and David both believe that the vomiting and the illness from the fruit was something fatal and that he was not going to survive. They thought the only alternative was for him to just lay there in agony and die a horrible, slow death.
What I thought I was doing was keeping my friend from going through 12 to 24 hours of hell before he died.
When asked why he had covered him with rocks, he said that he did not want his friend to be eaten by buzzards. He said that the buzzards had already been circling the block, flying around them. They believed, waiting on them to die. They thought that that was a sign that the end was very near. And he knew that they were going to try to go in if he had to just, allow him to lay there like that out in the open. And maybe he loved his friend so much that he mustered up the strength. And he also said that they made a pact to go out together, that he had attempted to carry out his end of the bargain, but he was just too weak physically to do it and wasn't able. Again, questionable, because then afterward you found the strength to lift boulders, some of which weighing over 70 pounds. I'm not saying they're right, I'm just saying it's a little validity to the questions, Legal experts at the time, they advised Rafi to just plead insanity. Just claim temporary insanity due to dehydration. Now, he ends up taking a plea deal where he'd plead no contest, waive his right to a jury, and then leave his fate in the hands of a single judge. So for 2 days, the judge hears the sides from the prosecution, they hear from the defense. According to the prosecution, things just don't make sense. They just don't add up. They were only 30 minutes from their car. They should have easily been able to find their way back to it from where they were. Now, according to the defense, there were two close friends that were just really very ill-equipped out there in the wild, who got lost, who are not the outdoorsy types, and in the hot sun were under too much emotional and physical distress to think clearly and find their way out. It was just an innocent trip that had unfortunately gone horribly wrong. Medical experts come in and testify how heat-related panic has been documented for hundreds of years, and under the conditions that these two guys have been suffering, they could have very easily been put in a mental state where they would make very irrational decisions. They were seeing phantom water bottles chasing them around, for God's sake. And where he faced a possible maximum sentence of 20 years in prison, he was instead sentenced to 15 years in prison with all but 2 years suspended, meaning that he would only have to serve the 2 years in prison and then would be on probation for the remainder of his time. His lawyer described his sentence as fair. He himself didn't seem too upset about it. I feel like he kind of understood what I did was wrong. He understood why he was being charged and all of the things. And so he was held in a New Mexico prison and then released in November of 2001. After his release, he relocated to California, where he was initially headed before this horrible trip to finish his education and live out the rest of his life. Y'all, they say he became an insurance broker. But yeah, let me know your thoughts down below. Like the video if you have not. As always, I appreciate, oh wait, my Love Island girlies, just a quick chat in the end, but everybody else, I appreciate you for spending your time with me, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Peace. Real quick on the Love Island tip, Huda gotta go. Okay, what is going on with Huda? The thing is, y'all, I was in that number. I was messy right along with y'all voting for Iris to be with Jeremiah. And I initially said, like, Huda can't go home. I need to see the fallout. I need to see the crash out. 2 episodes minimum. I saw enough 10 minutes into the episode. Get her out of here, okay? I'm sick of it. I'm tired. Jeremiah's tired. Ace is tired. Nick tired. Olandria tired. We're all tired. Who y'all like in the house, though? I feel like this is my thing. I was mad Charlie went home. I done heard some questionable things about Charlie since the show. So I don't know if I can be really mad anymore. It might be F Charlie. I don't know if the things are true. Is F Charlie. But Taylor really could have went on. I love me some Taylor, God knows I do. But Taylor's just there having a ball. Taylor there on a field trip. He is there on a field trip. And it's halfway not his fault because he did say he wasn't physically attracted to Olandria. All of the other girls have pretty much been taken. Amaya is crazy. And so it's really not anybody for him to choose from at the moment. I need them to bring somebody in that matches well with Taylor or get him out of here. He a waste of space right now, okay? We done laughed enough with Taylor. Send him home. Hannah crying with that picture. Hannah crying with that picture, like Hannah crying with that picture on the bed like she just attended this man's execution is crazy work. Do you hear me? Hannah is so cute, but girl, I need you to pull it all the way together because right now together it is not. I feel like they reached their little hand back in the bag and tried when they pulled out Jalen. I don't think Jalen is one either for my girl Landria. At this point, justice for Landria. And justice for Shelly. Send Austin home. I don't like Austin at all, baby. Send Austin home. He and Shelly literally have the same conversation every single episode. It's tired. I'm not buying it. They have no chemistry. They have as much, the two of them got as much chemistry as oil and water. Okay? Oil and water probably has a little more chemistry, a little more in common. They flow. What else I want to say about these people business before my time run out? Y'all got to get off Nick. Nick got a hickey on his lip. That is not a herp. It's a hickey. I've had a hickey on my lip before. Look at it. It's from all that kissing in the mouth they doing. And they need to stop that. It's just unsanitary. Now, before they get Huda out of there, I do need her to announce to one more person that she is a mommy. Because when she says that every time, I'm just like, girl, nobody cares. Literally no one. No one cares at all. What does this even mean to us? Child, Ace is there just playing in front of the camera as well. But Ace is a good chaos coordinator. Not in the sense that he's making the chaos, but he like positions it around, gets it together. We need somebody messy like Ace in the house. Who else is even there? I don't know the bombshells enough to give anything other than Jalen ain't the one for Olandria. But he ain't gotta go home. Keep him, child. Look at him. Why not keep him, you know? That's all I got to say right now. I want to know y'all's opinions down there. Let's talk about it in the comments. Please. Okay, bye y'all. Instead, they kept straight right down rattlesnake of a plan. Because by now they've just been walking aimlessly. Well, they have an aim, I guess, child. And that trail had Karns. Okay. And that with the Karens, he does not assume the worst. He just follows. So yeah, instead of my tongue. And because this happened at a national park, it is the fifth BI. They feel like they were the ones paying close enough to. There were all these pictures of the three I got attitude. I meant to shave my little mustache real before I sat down to film. He said that he did not want his friend to be eaten by bugs. You saw what my tongue did? I got an attitude. Oh, I'm so pissed off today. Thank you so much for watching. Everybody else, thank you so much for spending your time.